it be? But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to my continued coverage of the 2019 NFL Draft. We're starting first with the Scouting Combine, and I must say, no surprises today really except for one big dud. We'll get to that a little bit later on, but I've made it known how I feel about the Combine. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but as I always say, I spend, or in this case, waste 7 hours of my life so you don't have to. Let me give you the brief synopsis of what happened in day one of the Combine, which featured specialists, offensive line, and running backs. Now, who gives a shit about the specialists, right? So we're going to skip over them. I told you, I'm not really big into the offensive and defensive line. So I'll give you a quick little comb over as to what happened with the offensive line, and then we'll get to the meat and potatoes of what we really care about, which are the skill guys, and the group that was featured today were the running backs. And I talked about this on the podcast, and if you haven't already checked out the podcast, Louie T Network podcast, available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, iTunes, TuneIn, and of course the website louietnetwork.net. There's no excuse for you not to be listening. Dropped a new episode on Wednesday, and I tell you what, I talked about the Combine, I talked about free agency, talked about a lot of things. I've talked about a lot of things over the last month leading up to this Combine, and so I told you that the running back position was one of those positions that at first I wasn't overly blown away by the position. As a matter of fact, thought it was going to be a disappointing position this year. Then as I went and watched and actually dove into this group of running backs, it's actually a talented group of running backs. They're just not fast. And I told you that on the pod this week. They're not fast. And I didn't expect them to be fast. And I told you that I was looking for someone to come out and wow me, someone to show me that what I saw on tape, there's a little bit extra juice than what you saw on tape. I was hoping that a David Montgomery or a guy that I've been banging the table for, and Devin Singletary, I was hoping one of these guys would jump up and run a 4.48 or a 4.49. But what I got was what I saw on tape. Guys that just aren't fast but excellent running backs. And so let's talk about what we saw today. Let's first start with the offensive line, though. Look, I'm not going to spend too much time on the offensive line. Again, I'm not a big offensive, defensive line guy. Again, the Combine is for the aesthetics. It's for the skill guys. It's for the running, the jumping, all of that good stuff. And you just don't get that out of the offensive line. But you did see some athletes out there, and the guy that I thought was the biggest winner of the offensive line was Garrett Bradbury, a guy that I liked watching tape. And I've watched a ton of NC State tape this year just because of Ryan Finley and Kelvin Harmon. I've watched a ton of NC State tape, and the guy that has always impressed me was Garrett Bradbury. And so he stood out. I think he was the biggest winner among the offensive linemen. His athleticism was on full display today. Ran a sub 5.40. He was outstanding in all of the drills. I thought he helped himself immensely. A lot of people were looking at him as a potential first-round pick. With the performance he turned in today, coupled with the tape that he's put forth over the years at NC State, it's hard to argue with him potentially being a first-round interior offensive lineman. Speaking of first-round offensive lineman, another guy that helped himself immensely today was Andre Dillard, offensive tackle out of Washington State. I told you about him on the podcast talking about the Senior Bowl and how impressed I was watching him at the Senior Bowl. And so I told you that he was a guy that I said I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to because he was really impressive at the Senior Bowl. Well, he doubled down on that at the Combine, running a sub 5.40, looking very athletic. And a lot of people are saying he's the best offensive tackle in terms of pass protection in this draft. Well, he looked the part of a guy that can move and be very nimble on his feet. And so he's another guy that I thought had a very good showing at the Combine. Some other guys with Group 1 on the offensive side, on the offensive line, Cody Ford. I didn't expect him to be a great athlete and tester, but we know he's a physical mauler. You're not going to see that at the Combine. That's another reason why I'm not huge on the offensive nor defensive lines, because a lot of what these guys do not going to show up at the Combine, but he was there. He performed. Nate Herbig is the guy that I think is a physical presence in the run game out of Stanford. Didn't test well. Didn't expect him to. He lived up to his name. He's a big individual, hence the name Herbig. And so I thought he had a solid day as well. All of the boys from Wisconsin, we do this every other year or so where Wisconsin sends 3 or 4 guys to the Combine and to the draft. They did it again this year. Ben B, it was there. David Edwards, one of their tackles, and Michael Dieter, another guy from their line. All of those guys were there. And you expect nothing but the best out of places like Iowa and Stanford and Wisconsin, especially Wisconsin and Iowa, and I don't expect anything less out of those guys. I thought they were solid on the day as well. You go to group number 2. This is where the heavy hitters were. You had guys like Chris Lindstrom out of Boston College. You had Greg Little in that group. You also had Jonah Williams in that group and Jawan Taylor. So all of the heavy hitters, the guys that you're going to learn their names over the next month or two, if you already don't know their names, all of the first round projected offensive linemen, they were in that second group of O-linemen, and I thought they went out. Jawan Taylor was the only one of this group that didn't run the 40, but he performed on the field drills. Again, who cares about the 40s with these guys? But I will say one guy's 40 did pique my interest. Now I've got to go do some work on him. Eric McCoy ran the fastest 40 of any offensive lineman at the combine this year, running a 4.9 flat. So he was flying, and they said he's actually a good football player. So that got me thinking, yeah, probably need to do a little film study on this guy. So there are some times where running fast will cause people to pay attention to you. A la Teron Armstead about 5-6 years ago at the combine out of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Ran a 4.7 40, and all of a sudden everybody's scrambling to try to find out who this guy was. He ends up going early in the draft to the New Orleans Saints and ended up being a really good tackle when healthy. So Eric McCoy could be one of those guys. He's not coming from a small school, obviously coming from an SEC school. People probably already know who he is. I don't, but now I'm going to find out who he is because he ran well at the combine. But Chris Lindstrom was strong and solid. Greg Little, I wasn't all that impressed with him at the combine, but again, the combine isn't really for offensive linemen to me. You're not really going to hurt yourself. I already talked about it on the podcast that last year we saw a guy bomb in Brown last year, and what did he do? He just went and turned in one of the better offensive line performances this season of any rookie. So again, the combine is overrated for the big guys. It's more about the smaller skill guys. So a guy that I really like too is Dalton Reisner out of K-State, and I thought he was solid as well on the day, along with Caleb McGarry out of Washington. So that's really the offensive lineman that I was looking at in the combine in day number 1 in the first 2 groups. Then you fast forward to what I really showed up for, and and I was more so probably even than the receivers, because I told you there are a lot, and I talked about this on the podcast. Again, if you haven't checked out the podcast, what are you waiting? What the hell are you waiting for? You need to be listening to the Louie T Network podcast, and you need to be telling everybody else to listen as well. But I talked about the receivers in particular and the running backs. They're a big group. They're big physical groups there. How fast are you? And I think I already know, but again, this is what the combine is about, checking off boxes. And so I wanted to know, how fast was Devin Singletary? How fast was Elijah Holyfield? How fast was some of these guys? Miles Sanders, how fast are you? I really needed to know, how fast was David Montgomery? These guys are all quality backs that I really like, but how fast are you? Benny Snell, I knew he wasn't going to run fast, but still, okay, still, how fast are you? So I got exactly what I expected out of this running back group. I thought Justice Hill was going to run fast, and he did. He did blow out a tire late in his second run, so we didn't see him on the field. I was anxious to see him catch it, but nonetheless, he ran as fast as I expected him, that 4.4 flat, just about what I saw on tape, so that wasn't a surprise. I said he's going to be one of the few guys that runs fast. I talked about that on the podcast. He's going to be one of the few guys that runs fast at the combine, and he was. Now let's turn our attention to the entire group and the guys that I was paying attention to. Some guys caught my attention. One of the first guys, as a matter of fact, the first guy that ran, Raquel Armstead out of Temple, he had a hell of a day. I thought him and Miles Sanders may have helped themselves more so than any other back at the combine in 2019. I had no idea who Raquel Armstead was. I do now, and I can't wait to put on tape of this guy. And I'm hearing comparisons to C.J. Anderson. Well, he's faster than C.J. Anderson because he ran a 4.49, and C.J. Anderson isn't running a 4.49. C.J. Anderson in slow, but he ain't that fast. And this guy also caught the football extremely well, looked fluid. I really like what I saw out of him. And Kim Jones said that there are a number of teams that are really high on Raquel Armstead, and I see why. Rock Armstead helped himself today, and he's on my list now as a guy that I've got to go out and watch some tape on. Myles Gaskin, not really a huge Myles Gaskin fan. He does everything at Washington, but I'm not a huge Myles Gaskin fan. And so him running a 4.59 doesn't move the needle for me. He had a bunch of touches at Washington. I've watched a ton of Pac-12 football with him involved. And again, he's a do-it-all, all-purpose guy, but again, he wasn't one of my favorite backs in this draft, so he didn't move the needle for me at the combine with his performance either. Damian Harris, here's a guy that one of the Alabama backs, and I see all of your super chats. I really appreciate it, and we're going to get to your super chats here in a second, and I appreciate you guys extending those super chats my way. But I saw Damian Harris as a change of pace back. He was the starter at Alabama. Remember, the better of the two, Josh Jacobs, wasn't able to perform. Talked about that on the podcast. He's got a groin injury, so he wasn't going to perform at the combine. So Damian Harris had a chance to go out and shine. I thought he was really solid, but there's a big discrepancy between his two runs. Had a 4.49, which is right around what I expected out of him. You see some of those big runs. You look at that Vanderbilt game where he went off, and you see those big runs, and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, you know, the Ole Miss run, yeah, he's got 4.49 speed. And then he runs a 4.64, and wait a minute now, what the hell's going on out there? So he's probably somewhere in between, but nonetheless, I think he's a 4.49 guy. I think that's truly what he is. And I thought he was solid. He caught the ball well. Thought he did everything solidly in Indy on day one of the combine. Darrell Henderson is a guy that I briefly watched a little bit on because someone had said, hey, you need to check this guy out. And so I went and checked him out, saw a bunch of explosive plays and runs. I've got to actually watch tape of him and see what he's all about. But they were talking about him as if he was a big play threat. And then he ran the first 40 and he ran a 4.53. And I'm saying, okay, that's not slow, but it's not blazing fast. Then he turns around and runs a 4.37. And I'm like, whoa. So now I'm really intrigued by this guy. He's someone that I have to do more tape on, and he really helped himself, I think, with that 4.37, if that, in fact, is a legit time. Again, all of these numbers right now are not official numbers that I'm giving you. These are the numbers that we saw them time while they were running. The official numbers will come out later, but they won't be too far off from the numbers that we have currently in front of us. I talked about Justice Hill. He had a 40-inch vert, which tells you he's explosive. But I've got all this film study coming your way, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But 4.40, 4.4 flat. Dude was flying. That's what I expected out of him. I told you he's going to be one of the few fast guys in this draft, and he lived up to the billing. I'll save Elijah Holyfield for last. David Montgomery, 4.64 40. I was hoping for faster. I was hoping for a 4.55, a 4.57, somewhere in there. I like him so much. This isn't going to change the way I feel about him. I just know that there is no extra gear, and that's what you're going to hear from me with a lot of these backs. There isn't an extra gear. Generally, when these guys get into open field, they get up to top speed, and there is no extra gear. They can't pull away from defenders, but that doesn't mean these guys aren't exceptional backs, and David Montgomery is one of those guys in this draft that has exceptional quickness, exceptional toughness, yards after contact, great contact balance, everything you're looking for. Catches it out of the backfield. He displayed that today, catching the football during the combine. Everything except speed, and that's what you're going to hear from me with a lot of these backs. But 4.64 is what it is. I think he's still going to be an exceptional back in the NFL. Tony Pollard was a guy that I talked about on the podcast after the Senior Bowl, that I thought this guy looks like he has a little something. And lo and behold, I went and did some research because I told you after his performance at the Senior Bowl, I said, I've got to watch this guy more. And so what did I do? I went in and I did some homework, and what did I find? A guy that tied the NCAA record for most kick returns, touchdowns in NCAA history. I should have known. I told you this guy looked like he had a little bit of juice, and I knew something was there. I said, there's something more here with Tony Pollard, and I unearthed that. He ran a 4.53, not blazing fast, but some of the best punt returners, kick returners, they aren't blazing fast guys. All right, Joshua Cribbs wasn't a blazer, but he was really good at getting in and out of cuts and hitting the hole much faster than slow. And so Tony Pollard seems like he could be one of those guys that could help you in the returns game. He was solid on the day as well and caught it well. And he's also a slot guy too. If you watch tape of him, and I went back and watched some tape, he's also a guy that doubles as a slot receiver. So he brings a number of different things to the table, multi-dimensional. I like Tony Pollard. Thought he helped himself today as well. Benny Snell Jr. knew he wasn't going to run fast. Could have told you that. Anybody that watched any Kentucky football would have been able to tell you Benny Snell wasn't going to run fast. But what he did do was he held onto the rock, he punished defenders, and he was one of those guys that as the game wore on, he got stronger and more physical. You're not going to see that at the combine. He wasn't going to run fast. He ran a 4.67. That's right around what I thought he was going to run. I was hoping he'd run closer to 4.6, but it is what it is. He's a physical back. We know what he is as a player, and someone's going to draft him, and he's going to have a role in this league as a physical hammer type of back. Travion Williams is a guy that I really liked a couple of years ago, but he had a sensational year in the SEC, led the SEC in rushing this year. So I wanted to see how fast he was because he's made a ton of big plays throughout his career at Texas A&M, ran a 4.51. So that kind of matches up with what I saw on tape. Thought he would be a 4.47 guy, but 4.51, plenty fast for Travion Williams. I actually thought he caught the football well on the day too, so that's going to help him moving forward as well. Miles Sanders, one of the big winners of the day. I talked about him. I've broken his film down. You're going to get a draft prospects one-on-one on him down the road. But I looked at Miles Sanders, and the first thing that jumped out at me was he had to sit behind a all-world back in the Giants' first-round pick last year, Saquon Barkley. And he was one of the top recruits coming out of high school, the #1 rated running back, as a matter of fact. And I wanted to see what this guy was about. And I turned on the tape, and the first thing that jumped out at me was he had like 8 fumbles. So I'm nervous right away. And a lot of those fumbles weren't his fault. And so I said, all right, well, what's next? I saw a guy that could catch it. I saw a guy that could run it. I saw a guy that could make people miss. I saw a guy that was physical. I saw everything that I needed to see. Now I just wanted to know, how fast are you? Well, he went out and he checked that box running a 4.5 flat. I'll take it. Miles Sanders caught it well. He ran. He was fluid. Thought he had himself an exceptional day at the combine, day 1 with the backs. Devin Singletary, I told you on the podcast, is my favorite back in this draft. I was really rooting for him to run faster, and I told you that if he ran a sub 4.5, he would sneak into the back end of the first round. Well, my worst fears were confirmed. He's nowhere near that. He's not going to be a first-round pick. He probably won't even be a second-round pick with the speed that he ran. But I'm here to tell you, don't allow the lack of speed to sidetrack you on this guy. He is a difference maker. He's much quicker than fast, obviously, with him running a 4.66. But the guy can make you miss out in space. He gets yards that aren't there. He's the type of guy that changes the game, even though he doesn't have that extra gear. But nonetheless, I am still a Devin Singletary fan. I wasn't all that impressed with the way he caught it on the day. I was really hoping he caught it exceptionally well. But on tape, the guy never came off the field. I mean, Lane Kiffin tried to run this dude into the ground. One year, he had 301 carries. That's not even counting the catches he had out of the backfield, and they threw it to him a ton. The man had 301 carries one season in 2017. So this is a guy that touched it a bunch, and I think he is going to be a difference maker at the next level if he gets with the right coaching staff, the right offensive coordinator that utilizes him correctly. I thought he had a solid day. Wasn't blown away by Devin Singletary. I was really hoping for more, but that doesn't change the way I feel about him as a running back. Dexter Williams, a Golden Domer. I've seen more than my fair share of him, obviously me being a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan. 4.57 for him. Not a very explosive time, but he's a solid running back. He does a little bit of everything, and so I think he's a guy that, if he lands in the right spot, could have a career in this league, but I could easily see him not having a career in the NFL. We'll see what happens with him. I thought he had a solid day, but he did not blow me away. Another guy that I thought was really good today, and I wasn't expecting a lot from him, to be honest with you, was Mike Weber out of The Ohio State University. He ran a 4.49 twice, so he's really running a 4.49. I thought he caught it well. He looked so smooth and fluid out there. He caught everything. I was really surprised at how good Mike Weber looked, and he seems like he's got third down back written all over him if he can catch it consistently. And I've got to go watch tape on him now because I wasn't expecting a lot out of him, to be honest with you. I've got to go back and watch a little bit more of him. I'm familiar with what he brings to the table, but now I've got to go do a little bit more because I think that he has a chance to be one of those sneaky players in this draft that could actually have an impact early on in his career. The obvious big no-shows of the running back position, no Josh Jacobs, who's the best back by far and away in this draft class of all the running backs. You've got no Bryce Love, who tore his ACL. He should have never come back. He should have been in the draft last year. I really feel like he blew an opportunity to be a first-round pick last year. Now, who knows where this guy's going to be drafted? Probably mid-rounds, third, fourth round, somewhere in there. He really should have come out last year, but that's no reason for him. No reason for me to beat him up. I don't know what his situation is, but that's nor here nor there. He should have come out last year. He didn't, and now he's going to really fall in the draft because of his injury. And Rodney Anderson is the guy out of Oklahoma that I really like, but he sustained an injury this year, and so he's going to fall in the draft, and he could have easily been a first-round pick had he stayed healthy. All you got to do is go watch the Rose Bowl game versus Georgia. If you really want to know what Rodney Anderson is as a running back, go watch the Georgia game and watch him destroy them in the Rose Bowl, and you'll know all you need to know about what Rodney Anderson is all about. So that's day one of the Combine. Let's get to your comments and see what you guys have to say. Let's get to these Super Chats first, though. Ouija HTTR, what's going on, man? Hey, we ain't talked in a while, too, man, so it's good to hear from you, Brax. He says, haven't had to sit through the Combine the past few years thanks to your coverage. By the way, everyone, the Louie T podcast is free. Yeah, get you some, man. It's free of charge. There's no reason for you to not be checking out the Louie T Network podcast. Thanks for the Super Chat, Brax. And I definitely sit through the Combine so you don't have to, and I'm glad you take advantage of not having to sit through it. Skins fan all day, thank you for the Super Chat as well. He says the following. He says, good to see you back, bro. I've been needing my fellow Skin fans to unite, and we will do that. I've got a Skins video most likely coming down the pipeline. I'd like to say, if not this week, definitely next week, because free agency is almost upon us. So you're definitely going to get a video from me here shortly. But in any event, let's get to some comments quickly. Atlas says, yo, what up, Lou? Glad to hear from you. I haven't been watching the Combine, but who has really changed your opinion thus far? Well, it's only been one day, and I've already told you all the people that have changed my mind or swayed me. Oh, before I forget, the guy that had the absolute worst day, he looked awful today, was Elijah Holyfield. I was really looking forward to him. I broke down his film. I was really looking forward to him. I thought he had a chance to really ascend in this draft with a strong showing. He did anything but in this draft, this Combine. He really hurt himself today. He looked tight. He's one of those guys. I used to say this about Corey Maggette in basketball. Corey Maggette was too strong for the basketball. He couldn't shoot well. He could shoot free throws, but his jumper was never the way it could have really been because he was too strong for the basketball. He was a physical guy. And I look at Elijah Holyfield. He's too strong. He's too big and physically built. He's almost like a machine. He's not fluid. He's bulky, and his movements are very mechanical. He ran a 4.7. Let me go back and check the time I wrote down for him. I mean, he was awful today. He ran a 4.8. He ran a 4.78 and a 4.8. I mean, he was god-awful today. I did not see those times coming. I thought he was running in the 4.5, 4.6 neighborhood maybe, not 4.8. I mean, he ran as slow as the fullback that was out there. And he didn't catch it well, and he had to slow down and try to catch the football. He was awful. He really hurt himself today. Someone's going to still take him, I believe. And what you'll get is a physical back. But even when you watch the tape, he's looking to bounce everything. So if you're bouncing everything and you're running a 4.8, that doesn't bode well for you. So I walked away from this thing saying, wow, Elijah Holyfield is not what I thought he was going to be. And he might have just had a bad day, but bad days don't look exactly like that. Not from a skill guy. And so that was really alarming. That was disheartening. He really did some destruction. And I always talk about you can't hurt yourself that bad at the Combine. If he doesn't go light it up at his pro day, I don't know if you can recover from what he did today. And maybe that's why some of these guys don't run. That was awful. I mean, what he put forth today, that drops you 3 rounds, what he just did today. If some people went in with like a 2nd round grade on this guy, they left the Combine with a 4th or 5th round grade after what they saw today. He was tragic. That being said, Buffalo pregame says, what lineman have you seen would be a good fit for the Bills? I think the Bills need all the interior. Now, you did get Spencer Long, who's going to help you on the interior, but you still need help on the interior of your offensive line. And there are a number of guys that can help you on the interior. And some guys that weren't even at the combine today. Ivy out of Florida is a guy that can help you on the interior. Penrod out of NC State is another guy that can help you on the interior. But there are so many guys from Wisconsin that can help you in this draft. There are a number of different guys. K-State guy that I talked about, Reisner, is another guy that I really like. There are a ton of, like I said on my podcast, the draft at the offensive line position is so vast. You can get yourself a quality offensive lineman from rounds 1 to 4, and you don't have to panic. I think you can get a quality starter, day one starter, in the 3rd round potentially in this year's draft. That's how deep and rich I think the offensive line. Now, there aren't any elite players, I don't think. There aren't any top-heavy elite players, I believe, guys that you're thinking you got to spend a top 10 pick on. And I felt that way about the running back position. There aren't any elite running backs. Josh Jacobs is the best you're going to get. And I still question how elite he is. And that's why I wanted to see him at the combine. But the groin injury is going to stop us from seeing him, or stopped us from seeing him at the combine today. But there's so much depth at the running back position in this draft. You can get you a quality back all the way to the 4th or 5th round. So I feel the same way about the offensive line. A lot of guys that you can snag in this draft and feel really good about. Talked about Nate Herbig as a big physical. You trying to run the football? Nate Herbig is a guy that can help you run the football, plow guys, be a physical presence in there. It just depends on what you're looking for. Farrah Cody says, Redskins said they're good with Colt being a starter. What's wrong with them? Look, Jay, loves Colt McCoy. It is what it is. Ryan Armagas says, was just listening to your podcast. There's some good stuff on there. What do you think of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside? I really like him. He's one of the best 50-50 ball go-getters in this draft. You throw it up, and he goes and gets the football. That's probably the thing I love about him the most. He uses his frame to box guys out and goes and gets the football. Love that about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. He'll run over the middle of the field. He'll do the dirty work. He'll run those physical routes in between the numbers. There's a lot to like about J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I'm anxious to, again, just like the rest of the class of receivers, I'm anxious to see how fast he runs. Reese says, good to see you, Lou. It's been so long. Hope you are well. I am. And likewise, Ree, glad to hear from you, bruh. Reese says, pump for the Draft Prospects 101, Lou. It's that time of the year again. As a matter of fact, glad you brought that up. Draft Prospects 101 will begin on Tuesday. And starting on Tuesday, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I don't know what you're waiting on. You need to go ahead and do that. Turn on your notifications so that these are going to be rapid fire releases. And I can't tell you when they're coming out, but they're going to be coming out at you rapidly. So make sure you hit the notification button so when I upload, you get the notification and don't miss a single one of these videos. Skins fans all day says, bro, it's about time. Where have you been at? I've been in the lab, bro. I've been in the lab. B3 says, Louie T and the fam, this is a great time of the year for the NFL. Every team starts new and has a chance. Let's get it. Reese says, we're in a great spot at 5, Lou. We're going to get a good player. That you are. Especially with these quarterbacks creeping up the board, you're probably going to get an even better player than you're supposed to, because I think 2 quarterbacks are going to go in front of you, and you're at 5. So that tells you how the quarterbacks get pushed up the board. Nonetheless, Reese says, a sleeper prospect for me, Lou, is Paris Campbell. He's a guy that can run. And I want to see him time well. I talked about that on the podcast. He's going to time well. I expect him to time well. He doesn't run a lot of routes, though. At Ohio State, they did a great job of getting it in his hands quickly, but he didn't do much else. So I want to see him advance as a route runner, because he didn't run a ton of routes at Ohio State. Nonetheless, Ryan Armagost says, when will the Draft Prospects 101 drop? I just told you, Tuesday. Be on the lookout for the first of many of those to come. Armagost also says, if you've watched Kyler Murray tape, you can't help but notice CeeDee Lamb. He will be a beast next year in the pros. Yes. you can't help but notice CD Lamb. He is definitely going to be a handful come next season for sure. Reese says, I'm looking for my Chris Godwin, Lou. I've been right 2 years in a row. That you have for sure. Gregory Lightbody says, what do you think of Chris Lindstrom to the Redskins? I would not have a problem with him at all. Tough, physical football player. He's smart. He showed some athleticism today. Yeah, I would have no qualms about the Redskins taking him in the 3rd round if he's still available at that point. Absolutely would have no problems with it. Even if they felt like they had to grab him in the 2nd round, I wouldn't have an issue with that either. DMV fan 123 says, sweet spot for an interior offensive lineman for the Skins this year. We got 2 third-round picks. Like I said last year, the 3rd round was the round I wanted to get an offensive lineman. Same thing applies this year. I think the first 3rd round pick that we have 2. Remember, we get the compensatory pick for Kirk. So we have the first compensatory pick in the 3rd round. I think it's 96th overall. I want that first pick, though, the one that's actually ours in the 3rd round, to be spent on an offensive lineman, particularly an interior offensive lineman. Gregory Lightbody says, who are you most excited to see tomorrow? All the big receivers. I talked about it on the podcast. I am dying to see all of the big receivers. DK, Nikhil, AJ, David Sills is a guy that I like out of West Virginia. JJ Arcega-Whiteside. There's so many big receivers. Hakeem Butler, Harmon out of NC State. All of these guys are massive. They're huge, 6'3" or better. How fast are you, though? That's what I'm anxious to see. We've got a ton of big receivers in this draft. How fast are you? I'm dying to see. And the tight ends in this draft are ridiculous. I've got 9. I talked about them on the podcast. There are 9 freaky athletes at the tight end position. I can't wait to watch tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be my favorite day. After tomorrow, we can pack up the rest of the combine for all I care. Tomorrow is the day that I'm going to be most honed in on what's going on. It's going to be a fun day tomorrow for sure. Cloud says, I'm liking Miles Sanders, man. Holyfield, in my opinion, will bounce back on his pro day, hopefully. Man, he was bad today. If he doesn't bounce back on his pro day, he may not get drafted. It was that bad. Gregory Lightbody says, Skins had a chance if they went 6-10 over 7-9. It is what it is. Deshaun Drakeford says, where you want to see Kyler Murray go? I've got a video coming out about that later on today. Stay tuned for that. Ryan Omega says, who's your top cornerback? Mine is Byron Murphy. I'm going to release my top 5 at each position as we go along in the process. So stay tuned for that. And finally, Skins Fan All Day says, have you heard about the new rules? YouTube, as it says, it's real bad. Check it out before it happens to you, bro. No, I haven't heard about anything. I'll have to check that out. Thanks for the heads up. And Reese says, Paris Campbell from Ohio State, Lou is a wide receiver. We talked about him already or earlier in the show. So that's going to do it for your man, Louie T. Day 1 of the Combine. Some big standouts along the offensive line and at the running back position, and one big stinker in Elijah Holyfield. But some guys stood out. Rock Armstead out of Temple, big day. Miles Sanders out of Penn State, big day. I actually thought that Mike Weber out of Ohio State, big day. Offensive line-wise, Bradbury out of NC State, big day. Andre Dillard out of Washington State, big day. You had some guys like Eric McCoy out of Texas A&M, run fast, open some eyes. So, again, that's what the Combine is for. Checking boxes, opening eyes, and you're hoping that you're not like Elijah Holyfield and you're trending in the wrong direction after the Combine. We'll see what happens, though. That being said, thank you guys for joining me. If it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Don't forget to check out the podcast, Louie T Network podcast, available on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Music Play, TuneIn, and of course the website, louietnetwork.net. I'll see you guys a little bit later on, as we got a ton. There's going to be a lot of content coming out of this channel over the next few days. It's that time. Celebrate! We about to turn it up here on the Louie T Network. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for joining me. Have a good one.